Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser, and for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest, Roger Deering. He has been in a lot of bands over the years. For those of you that are in Florida, you may remember him from the band The Drills. Hey Roger, how are
Yo,
you?
what's happening, man? This is cool. Thanks for having me here.
It is a pleasure
Yeah,
having you on. I'm glad we're able to connect and to document not just the drills, but also your life, because you've been a very busy musician over the years. Is that right?
I've had periods of being busy, and I've had periods of not being busy, but it's been a long journey since the drills for sure.
I imagine, because that all started back when, the early 80s?
Drills started in the early '80s in the South Florida punk scene. We didn't start out as the drills. We started out as a band called the Upsetters. And the Upsetters were formed by me and a high school buddy from New England. uh, Mike Hall. He came down, and we said, let's put together a band down here. We were going out and checking out the local scene and seeing cool bands. We were going to Finders Lounge. We were going to the in Hollandale Beach. I saw the Misfits there, and I saw Black Flag there. Um, I saw some really great local bands like the U.S. Furies, which I didn't know at the time, but that was the next band for Isaac Burrich, who was in the Reactions, who were phenomenal. And I just started seeing the scene down there, and I had moved down from New England, uh, and I was already drumming up there, trying to get in bands. I was friends with Gigi Allen back then. We all
Real
knew each.
quick, real quick. What was that like being friends with Gigi?
Well, the Gigi that became notorious and famous for all the things that he became famous for, he wasn't really quite there yet. Gigi was a good rock singer. He was wild. He was already wild and in Iggy type of stage personality, but he wasn't out of control or whatever to the point where uh, you know, I don't know. He became a different guy down the road, but early on he was super cool, and I used to get letters from Gigi for years. He would write me, and we stayed in touch. Cool dude. But he was up in New England trying to do stuff. I was trying to do stuff, and I'm probably about 17 at this point. And I headed down to Miami. I got in some trouble up in New England. And so I took off to a safer place, so to speak. And my mom was living in Miami at the time, so I went down there. And like I said, I started checking out the scene. I got in touch with Mike Hall, who was my neighbor up in New England. I said, come down here and let's start a band. And he came down. We met the other dudes. I met Alex Herrera. His car was broke down on US 1. I was pumping gas in a gas station at that time for a job, trying to put a band together. I saw this poor guy in the middle of US 1 pushing a red Nova, trying to get it out of traffic. I ran over to help him. We started pushing the car, and I looked over, and when I looked in his car, he had some buttons. Remember the little punk rock buttons? And he had a Bad Brains button, and I went, "Wow, this is like the first dude that I've encountered that knows who the Bad Brains were." And when I was helping him push his car, I noticed he had a little earring, but it was a guitar string. And I went, "Oh, this guy's a guitar player." And we started talking, and he had just moved down from DC, and he brought over his guitar and his Les Paul, and the guy played like James Williamson of the Stooges. He shredded, he ripped, and I just went, oh my God, this is the dude. Three of us eventually met Carrie Furlong, who was 16 years old. At this point, we had already been playing as the Upsetters, and then Carrie joined. Carrie used to have to wait outside the club till we were ready to go on, and he could run in and play, and then they'd kick him out of the club. He was underage. And then, you know what? The four of us, we stuck it out. And eventually we started playing a club there called Flynn's Ocean 71. I don't know if you've heard of Flynn's. It was the CBGBs of South Florida. It was 7 nights a week, nonstop rock and roll. I saw everybody in there. I saw the Minutemen. I saw the Dream Syndicate. I saw Black Flag multiple times in there. I saw Sonic Youth in there. I saw so many cool bands. The Drills started playing there regularly. There was a couple people booking the place. There was a guy named John Flynn that owned the club, and he used to call me when bands would cancel, and he'd always tell me, "You guys are the best $50 band in town." Paid us $50, and then we started getting on the bigger shows. We opened a show for the UK subs, and that was it. We were off and running, and eventually Flynn's closed. The scene went through various changes, and then came the Cameo Theatre, which is very notorious now. And we became a regular at the Cameo. Richard Shelter, you've probably interviewed Richard over the years here.
Yeah, he's been on.
Richard kind of was our guy. He always said to people, those guys are tight. They're a tight band, and they show up and they play and they bring people. What else do you want? And so we were playing a lot of shows at the Cameo, and during that period, we were playing with everybody from the Ramones, the Dead Boys, you name it, every bit. Husker Du. We play with everybody while our tenure in Florida.
For those that didn't see you all at that time, because you played with a lot of punk bands, maybe more hardcore bands and that sort of thing, but your sound as the Drills, it really wasn't the same as some of those bands that you played with. So how would you describe the Drills music to someone listening to this interview who was not as familiar with the Drills, or maybe didn't get a chance to see you all play?
I think we never really sounded like a hardcore band, but we played with the conviction of a hardcore band. And our sound was more like Motorhead. The early Drills was a little bit more rock and roll, like maybe a little bit of Johnny Thunders vibe in there also. But when Kerry joined, he had this kick drum style, and he drummed just like Filthy Animal Taylor from Motorhead. And that was the common bond, was Motorhead. So I would say that the Drills evolved into kind of a garage rock Motorhead. And because of that aggression, we went over great. I mean, kids were slam dancing to our shows all the time. We were part of the hardcore scene. We just weren't generic hardcore. We were bringing what we were bringing. And we, like I said, we played with enough conviction and volume and power that the kids were growing mental. They were slam dancing, stage diving. To them, it was just high energy. Yeah. But the Drills eventually, Alex Herrera was the first to kind of go. He's gone now. He's passed away. The first of the great guitar players that I've been lucky to play with in my 40 years of rock and roll now. But Alex passed away, not while he was in the Drills. This was years later, but he kind of fell by the wayside. He was, had stuff going on. And we brought in a different guy named Greg Dawson. We were still doing big shows and as well as club gigs. But eventually what happened was there was a big giant show with the Circle Jerks and the Necros and us. And it turned into a riot at this show. At this particular stage, if you remember, in the hardcore scene, both, for instance, the Necros and the Circle Jerks, as well as the Drills, all went through a period where they all started growing their hair long and started getting in a little bit more metal and rock. Necros definitely did that. The Circle Jerks were getting a little bit more, musical. And so I don't know what triggered it, but there was eventually Keith Morris, who's a dear friend of mine, he got pissed off about something and he sat down on the stage and refused to play. and it caused this thing where the skinheads charged the stage. Next thing you know, Greg Hetson, another good friend of mine, is in a fist fight with a couple of skins, Miami skins. They ran over. They're now brawling with the Necros. It's a full-fledged fucking brawl. A group of guys come running over to where our little group of people, the drills and our people, were standing on the side of the stage. Now we're in it, and it was like, oh, let's get out of here. It got really ugly, and ended up with us running to jump in our van with like 20 skinheads chasing us. It was like a scene out of the Beatles, Hard Day Night, except it wasn't chicks, it was
Right.
skinheads. And like, so we dove in the van and took off. And I just remember after that show going, you know what, this scene, fuck this scene. I probably can't say that word, right?
No, you can speak as freely as you wish.
Right on. We're like, you know what, we felt like we were outgrowing the scene. It was like, who wants to play to a bunch of kids that want to beat up the band members, or like standing there flipping you the bird because you're not playing generic hardcore. It was a younger, different crowd coming in, and it was time for us to go. I just knew it. And like, so the drill said, well, do we go to New York, where we knew some other Miami people? Alex Mitchell and Gary Sunshine were doing Circus of Power, another kick-ass great band, all Florida alumni. So we knew some folks up there, but Mike Roach from T.S.O.L, I was a really good friend with him, and he kept saying, come to LA, I'll hook you guys up out there. And we did. We made the move to LA in '87. And, we roughed it out. We slept in our cars in the parking lot at Rock and Roll Ralph's here. And eventually, we landed on our feet here. And that's a whole nother chapter. The drills evolved into something else. It's been a journey, but that Florida punk scene that we came out of was so vibrant, especially in Miami. The variety of bands there was astonishing.
Yeah.
And
I know we were talking about, you mentioned TSOL, and we were talking before the interview about a show that you played with TSOL and Orlando band Noise for the Needy at the Cuban Club in Ybor City in Tampa. So what was it like playing shows outside of South Florida? Maybe when you made your way up further north, whether it be the Gulf side or the Central side or North Florida. Talk about that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. We at one point we did a show with D.R.I down in Miami. And one of the guys from D.R.I, I think it was the singer, I'm drawing a blank on his name, he's really cool. He started telling promoters about the drills. And now we started getting phone calls from clubs, up and down the coast, East Coast and out of state. And so the Cuban club thing, we went to Tampa a number of times. That the one thing I remember about that Cuban club thing, that's the outdoor theater, right? That's killer. I remember there was this asshole running around spraying like pepper spray on people while they were, slamming and having fun. And this is one of the things I remember about that show. And the drill stopped the show and said, that guy right there has got to go. Like, we wanted him gone. He was like not cool at all. And then I just remember there was like a group of kids that wanted to kick our ass after the show. That's the main thing I remember about that night.
I've had people come on the podcast when talking about Tampa at that time, how it was even more violent than South Florida was at that time. Did you have that same experience when you went to Tampa?
I definitely saw that. There was definitely an element of it there. And I mean, generally, the drills always garnish the respect of whoever we were playing in front of, no matter how skeptical they may have been or whatever. But that particular night, I do remember like literally stopping the show and going, this guy asshole right here just let's kick them out of here. But I do remember the venue. I remember the night. I remember that. And as in T.S.O.L, that was the Joe Wood period. And Mitch was the drummer. The Revenge, and what was the other album they did? Change Today. T.S.O.L Change Today. It's a great record. And that was that lineup of T.S.O.L. And we would play with those guys all the time too. I was their cocaine connection.
How did they know you were the guy for that, Roger?
Well, we played with them early on. That was another band. When we were the Upsetters, we did a show opening for T.S.O.L. It was a 2-night stand. T.S.O.L toured all the time. They were coming down through South Florida and making that journey for a punk band back then, up and down Florida. That's commitment, man. That's commitment. Those guys were going for it. We just met them early on, and those were the days. A lot of drugs and alcohol. Everybody was drinking and smoking and snorting. That's what you did.
It was
great guys. All of those guys are great. I still are friends with all of those guys.
Nice. Yeah, I could probably spend an hour just talking about those shows at T.S.O.L. I'm a fan of that band, but this is about the Florida Sound Archive, so we won't get into all that. But I do want to talk more about your time playing in other parts of the state. Did you ever get a chance to play places like Orlando, Gainesville, Tallahassee, that sort of thing?
Atlanta, which is, that Atlanta back in the day had the, what was the name of that place? It's a punk club where, you could crash there. They had like little bunks upstairs, and they would just lock you in if you wanted to spend the night. They'd go, okay, and they'd give you a small keg of beer. But we did a lot of shows all throughout Florida, different halls. And this was before punk was a business. It wasn't a business. It was a local promoter kid that was probably 17 to 20 years old that found a cool little VW hall or whatever, VFW hall, or, a little gym or old beat down spot, and started promoting shows. All of those hardcore shows were like that. Bands were traveling in a station wagon, or that's just how it was those punk days, So we did. The Drills played wherever we could,
When you guys were traveling up and down together, did you have any favorite places to stop at? Any kind of roadside attractions you would normally try to get to?
No, not really. It was more about we got to get there. Let's drink as much alcohol as we can while we're on the road, and then let's get back. It was just let's just get there, and it wasn't the tourist attractions of Florida were still any kind of interest to us at that point. But
they were more prominent though back in the 80s. Now everything looks the same, but back then there were a lot more things you could probably detour off to if you wanted to.
Definitely. Like Alligator Pit or whatever, the Mummy or whatever.
Exactly.
No, back then we weren't necessarily, I wouldn't say we were touring, but we would head out to gigs, and if we could string a couple gigs together, even better. But there was many a time where we just drove from Miami with a stop maybe in Tampa or maybe Orlando, or just straight to Atlanta and come back. There was no rhyme or reason other than, hey, this promoter up here wants us to play. Let's go play it. It wasn't like there was a touring schedule back then.
Yeah. I'm also thinking too, to kind of help get the word out about you guys, what zines or publications do you remember back then that was also helping to spread the word of the Drills?
I remember, locally we were always had a lot of press, but the Drills, I remember us being in, believe it or not, a Cream magazine. And also, we were in Maximum Rock and Roll. I remember remember that mag. That was pretty much the hardcore magazine, I think. They seem to be kind of fond of us. I got a letter from Jello Biafra back then in Miami asking for a copy of the Drills record. I gladly mailed him one. I thought that was kind of cool. He collects punk rock records. We did do that record in the Drills did a record, and people have been asking me about it and stuff, and it's cool, but like I always had a chip on my shoulder about that album. And it's funny, when Joey Seaman from the Punk Under the Sun book was given doing an interview, I told him how I felt about that record, and I think he omitted it out of the book, out of the sense of like he didn't want to offend anybody about it, but I just felt like it didn't represent who we were as the sound of what we were live. And there was some recording things that happened, primarily Alex Herrera, who I was talking about earlier, who literally sounded like James Williamson on steroids. And his rhythm guitar playing, he would play lead and rhythm all at once, was very noisy. But that was the beauty of it. Like, you know what I mean? It was like Greg Ginn from Black Flag or something, just noisy as hell. And it got removed out of the mix for a cleaner guitar thing. And it's just so hard for me to even listen to. So it's a sore spot. But on the other hand, when we put it out, it got picked up for distribution through like Gem, which was kind of a big distributor. And subsequently, we started getting a lot of press out of it, also being in Cream magazine, which is kind of cool. It was a really good review too of the album. And I've seen other things where people have went, oh, that Drills record was kind of the beginning of this punk and roll thing, because we were rock and roll also. It wasn't all just, like we were into the Stooges and Motorhead, and that was before those bands became like, role model for a whole bunch of other bands. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
And
yeah.
the cover, I think, is also iconic, like that the '87 album, right? The
Right.
self-titled one. When I first saw the cover, not knowing what you sounded like at the time, I was thinking this is going to be like metal. And then when I heard it, I mean, there's elements of that
Yeah.
in there, but
Yeah.
I didn't get like a full-on heavy metal record. So when
Right.
you all were putting together the cover and the artwork and all that, like what went into getting that all together, and maybe walk us through what that process looked like?
Well, that record came about. There were some people that had some money and wanted to get the Drills into the recording studio. We had done some other demos and stuff, but so we went in and worked on this thing. But I didn't know anything about recording. I didn't know jack shit, even though I was the primary songwriter of the band. But the technical end of it, and I'm still kind of like that. All my energy seems to be focused in the creative end of music, and the technical end is still this, thing that I have to deal with. But with the Drills, Kerry, our drummer, had a recording experience, and he kind of took the helm of it. And I don't know, I just didn't really like the way things progressed with the record, and when it pulled out the noisy guitar stuff, I just felt like it was not a proper presentation of who we were. On the other hand, like I said, I am proud of it. Just the sense of it is, it's an achievement. It's a testimony of what we were doing at that time, musically. Just it didn't. I felt we cheated the people that should have heard it.
And it's perhaps the only accessible recording you can get from the Drills, because the
Of the
tape,
Drills.
yeah, because the tapes, unless you get lucky scoring one of those, they're very far in between. But the
There,
record, that comes up for sale every now and again.
yeah, there's some other stuff. We did record more of a straighter metal album after Alex left with this new guitar player. It was much more punky metal, but that never got it just kind of we never could really find a home for it. And by the time that time moved on, I had already moved into a different phase of with a whole new group of songs. So, but that there's another record called The Sowers of Discord, and I don't know, maybe me or Carrie should try to like spend some time and find somebody who wants to put it out. But there's a lot of really good drill stuff. I think that the Drills as a band, we didn't really blossom fully till we got to LA. Like LA changed the band in a bigger way, like it to the point where it was very much sink or swim. We were good, but like now we're in LA and there's just like a million bands, a million bands. And but I think we moved forward as a band here, and then in 1989 or 90, in 1990, we landed a big record contract worth millions of dollars. So, yeah, we were dreamers, and yeah, we slept on the floors, and like we came out of the punk scene, the Florida punk scene, the South Florida punk scene, the South Florida hardcore scene, and managed to kind of evolve and get a record deal a few years later after we left LA was, to me, testimony that the band was real. There was a commitment there, and there was a musical vision and a goal that me and Carrie, the drummer, we both had that in common. Like we had stuck it out all those years and got a record deal. But that became the next chapter of me and Carrie's musical journey together that started in Florida. And that band evolved into a band called Rattlebone. And, that's a different story too. But
Do you
I
think
don't know
when
where
you think when you got the contract, did it change anyone in terms of the vibe of the band? Did anyone change their approach based on their being now, before, here we're doing this for fun, this is all great. But now that there's money involved, sometimes, money can sour things. Did it change anything in the band?
no, it really didn't. We got a cash advance. We all went and got some gear, which was amazing. I mean, walking into Guitar Center and saying, I want that Rickenbacker bass, if after never having a new instrument in my entire career at that point, it was cool. Like we got a cash advance. We now had our rehearsal space paid for, which I don't remember how much it was, but it was on the corner of Hollywood and Western in the most notorious building in LA practically. The floors were, full of hypodermic needles, and, the Crips and the Bloods were shooting at each other, and the Hondurans and the Ecuadorians were having gunfights, and this was all right there. So we finally had a way to pay for that place, instead of us having to hustle. Now we had a record company covering that bill. And then we got some tour support, which we never had before. Now we were able to go in a van and play for 30 days and come home. And so, but individually, no, it didn't change any of the guys. We were who we were. The unfortunate downside of this whole thing is that years before we had landed a record deal worth a lot of money, I had a bad drug problem going on back then. And so when that was going on, that was getting worse as time was going on. And, we still got the big record deal. We were still touring and stuff, but the drugs were definitely taking prominence in how I was dealing with my daily activities. I was a drug addict, and that became the priority. And guys were now waiting on me, and and then that's when things started to change. It really didn't have anything to do with us getting a record deal. That was more about like, cool, this is what we are all here and striving for. Now we got it. Now let's rock it. So the starting point of it was great.
Yeah.
It was really cool and an amazing experience from having to eat shit for 13 years before that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of that experience you went through with the whole drug use and what have you, did you find yourself having to go to rehab, or were you able to come clean or cleaner, maybe with the support that was around? Like, how did that work for you?
Well, that came later on down the road. I've been clean now for almost 22 years. So I didn't get clean. Rattlebone ended up eventually. We what happened with Rattlebone is we put out a record, EP. We toured off of it, and we came back home. The record company was telling us, "Your record has sold 80,000 copies. Your album, when you're done, is going to go gold." We had this guy Dave Jordan producing our records. Dave Jordan was the hottest producer in rock and roll at that point. He had done Jane's Addiction. He did Alice in Chains, the first two albums. He did the Offspring record that exploded through the roof. He's worked with the Stones. He was a major record producer involved with us. And so, the goal was to make a great record with this guy. And while we were making the record, the drug problem came to a head. The engineer, Dave's engineer, is driving me downtown so I can cop heroin, so I can be functional in the studio to get through the day. And it's not good. We had a big fight in there. Dave walked out. It was a disaster. And so we ended up finishing that record. Subsequently, that record gets canned, put on a shelf. They start to pull the money away because they're now sensing dysfunction, right? And then that was it. It came to a halt. Brendan, our lead guitar player, went to Masters of Reality, who are gods, and then from Masters of Reality was in Queens of the Stone Age for 7 years. So the pedigree of that band in the musicianship, it was badass. And it was still me and Carrie. I was still on bass and vocals, Carrie on drums, Brendan McNichol on guitar, and we had a Hammond B3 organ player, which was insane because he played through Marshalls and it's like Deep Purple on meets Motorhead. But that band came to a halt. That was it. That's how it just petered out from drug use. We just got burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you find yourself able to rebound? Like, what came next for you once that kind of fizzled out?
Well, I kicked around for a little bit, strung out, and then I ended up playing with my friend Brian Small in the Hangman. He was calling it Sick Greenheart at the time. I did some shows with those guys. They kicked me out because I was getting loaded. It got to the point where I couldn't do music anymore. All the guitars were gone. Eventually was homeless. And at this point, I'm 39 years old, and I'm sleeping in a garage at this point. And a friend of mine and another two friends of mine came and they got me, and they said, we're taking you somewhere. And I was too beat down. I was just done. And they brought me to a hospital out in Pomona here in California. And I detoxed out there, and I got clean, and I've stayed clean. So that was at age 39. And from that point on, my musical journey, that's when I did Smash Fashion. And I did Smash Fashion because I was happy to be alive. And, it was like being born again without Jesus, but through music, and like feeling like, wow, man. And, because I had wasted a lot of years on the heroin. And so I wanted to do colorful vibrant, fun music. And we made that band did. I think we made some really cool records. It took us a while. I think our third and fourth record are great. I am so proud of that stuff. I think it's some of the best stuff I've ever been involved with. And but that was the mindset. Like I didn't want to be in a dark space. I wanted to dress cool. I wanted to play fun music. I wanted it to be loud and sexy and funny, but still kick ass.
That's what I like about Smash Fashion is you get a real visual of what's going on because there's a lot of videos that you
Yeah.
can watch. So talk about that. Talk about the
Mhm.
importance of being able to have not only the music aspect,
Mhm.
but the visual part as well. People can also
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah. Well, I think the video thing, we did do a lot of videos with that band. We had a friend who was great, great camera guy, and he was a fan of the band, and we were a fan of what he was able to do. And we would pick out certain songs along the journey, and we just figured this is an economical, cool way to try to get some exposure. And it's like the videos have always frustrated me in the sense that creatively I love them. I think they're fun and they're great and all that, and I think it reads who we are musically also. But it always kind of chafed me that the they would cap out at like 5,000, 7,000 views when I would see stuff that where I'm just scratching my head going, how how the fuck does this video have 500,000 views? Like there's certain things I would just scratch my head going, I don't get it. Like it's terrible. But I never could figure out the whole algorithm vibe of like how do you make a video go viral? Like my last band, the band that I'm doing right now, Crymwav, we kick ass video. 4,000 views or whatever. Like I don't know. I'm not a salesman. But I don't get it.
It
But
is.
sorry, went off topic there.
That's
About
okay.
about
It
the
is.
video.
It is interesting though how that can all work out because sometimes the thing it's like music. Sometimes that song you think is going to be the hit isn't, but the song on the B side becomes even more popular. You didn't
Yeah,
see it. You don't always see it coming, but
yeah,
it's weird how it works out that
yeah,
way.
yeah, for sure.
But you know, with thinking about touring for a minute because having moved out to LA and starting to get into some different bands. I know you went through that period where you were recovering and trying to get clean, right? So did you do or attempt any touring in these years prior to Crime
No,
Wave starting?
no. Smash Fashion did stuff. We Smash Fashion went to Europe twice. We were in the UK, and we did numerous little jaunts on the East Coast. Uh, uh, it was great because our bass player at that time, Scarlett, he was living in Philly, so we could all we could get to Philly and we would rehearse in Philly, and then we could do a run of shows, up to New York, back through the Jersey shoreline, all that stuff, which I'd like to get going again really soon with Crime Wave. But as far as like in-depth touring, no, it just never, we could never find a booking agent that was willing to go that deep with us. It was really weird. We Smash Fashion was caught in this weird place where it was kind of uncool to be doing what we were doing. You know what I mean? Like it just it was hard to find a group of like-minded bands to attach with for us. Where a little bit later on it became this thing, and they were calling it, the new wave of glam or whatever. And there were some cool bands involved in that, but we at that point, I first of all, I never thought of Smash Fashion as a glam band. I always thought of us as a flamboyant rock band. Like, it's like I never thought that we crossed the line into cheesy. I always thought that there was a good boundary with what we were doing on keeping things cool. I'm proud of that band. I really am. I'm still Stuart, his guitar work, Stuart Kassan, who we also know through the hardcore scene. He's a DC guy. And he was the guitar player in Smash Fashion, and he's the guitar player in Crymwav. And he's, huge in what the whole vibe is about. And like, that was the other thing. I always thought Smash Fashion, at least listen to the guitar playing, for God's sakes. Like, especially on his end, like there's some fantastic guitar stuff in those songs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think when it comes to labels, I think labels and genres and all that sort of thing, I think have morphed a bit
Yeah,
over the years. So what was once maybe this, different
yeah,
generations don't always think of it in that way. So
sure.
I can
Yeah,
imagine maybe that's why some people may have thought, oh, this is like a glam band, versus like maybe just more like a flamboyant band because of just the
yeah,
way artistically it may have come through and just that morphing of what some of these terms have meant once upon a time and maybe what they mean
yeah,
in
yeah.
today's times. So
Well, I do remember that when we made the Big Cat Love record, which is probably my favorite of the records we did. When we made the Big Cat Love record, we had enough common sense this time to go that this record needs a publicist, right? So when we got a publicist on board for that record, he said to us, well, I need to market you guys to I need to have a point to go off of. And he's the one that brought up the glam thing. And I remember at first I was a little bit apprehensive. I was like, because there's a lot of people that would associate glam with, say, maybe Motley Crue or Poison. Not saying anything negative about that, whatever, but that's not where we came from musically, aesthetically, or even visually. Like, our thing was more like, like glam, like maybe like a T-Rex thing, or, just an earlier period of
right.
glam.
That's what I
Is
usually think about when someone mentions
right,
glam.
right. But what my concern was is that when people went, oh, Smash Fashion's a glam band, and then immediately they're turned off because they're associating glam with this other thing. You know what I'm saying? So I I had to go with it because they needed to have something to push the record off as, but whatever. I ultimately I don't give a shit. That was a great band, and I had a pleasure of playing with some great musicians while we did that. The great Tony Kinman. I don't know if you know about Tony, but Tony was in the Dills, one of the first American hardcore band. Toured with the Clash and Bo Diddley. I mean, the dude was a legend. Rank and File was his other band, and that guy played. He's the bass player on the Big Cat Love record. Man, that dude's a fucking legend. So I'm proud of the recorded legacy, especially the last two records. I think we made a couple of really good records.
What caused that band to stop?
Um, well, Crime Wave started off as let's make the fifth Smash Fashion record, and we were trying to find people. Uh, our rhythm section, Repo, one of the great drummers I've been lucky to play with, Repo moved back to Finland. Repo was in Smack, which is like their Finnish rock gods. They're great. Repo was in that band. But when he went back to Finland, honestly, we couldn't find anybody to fill his shoes. No matter how many times I jammed with other people, they weren't good enough. And so I don't know. We started to lose enthusiasm, and but then I had a grip of songs again, and I said, "Look, let's see if we can get a rhythm section going." To Stuart, and we had a couple different other guys come down. We found a bass player I really loved. Then he disappeared. Found out later he went to prison and federal charges.
Wow.
So yeah, but then we hooked up with these two other cats. They came in as a rhythm section. They were from the stoner doom scene. They're in a band called Goat Snake, pretty heavy sounding.
I am
And
familiar.
yeah, they had another band. They're another band called Sonic Medusa. So these guys came in together, bass player and drummer, and we started jamming with them. And we were going through some of what I was thinking would be some of the new Smash Fashion material, and it became evident that this was. We started jamming, and it became evident this was going to be something different. And it did. It's a little bit. It's funny. I've gone a little bit back towards, I think, the Drills aesthetic of punky hard rock, with but left of center. And I think that's the one thing. Whether it's the Drills or whether it was Smash Fashion or now Crymwav, it's always been a little bit off and a little bit left of center. It's like you either like it or you don't. We're finding more and more people are digging what we're doing, and I think there's a realness and a commitment to making music from the guys involved in this band that translates when you hear it. It's like, okay, this is good.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this band.
What do you think helped to contribute that shift to maybe doing more music that taps into some of the Drill's sound? Were you listening to anything different? Was it the people that you were in the band with? Like, what do you think brought that on?
That's a good point. Actually, it's both of those which you had mentioned. I found myself a few years back going back and listening to a lot of stuff that was coming out in my formative years. So 1979, say, and I'm listening to a lot of different music that was coming out. There was Cheap Trick, there was the Pretenders, there was Killing Joke, there was the Cars, there was Van Halen, there was the Ramones, there was just so much great rock and roll going on, and a lot of it was new and exciting, including the new wave of British metal and punk. And a lot of that new wave of British metal stuff is this stuff that inspired Stewart as a musician. My school's a little bit more like garage rock, but uh, I was listening to that. The song, I started writing songs that were more aggressive. We're older, things have changed. A lot of our friends are dying or gone. There's a different energy in the air. America's a different vibe politically. There's a different political climate going on. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of disconnect, and a lot of chaos for guys like for me, from my generation. A lot of times I look around and I go, wow, it's just crazy. Families don't talk to each other over politics. There's gun violence out of control. It's just, I don't know. The rose tinted glasses that Smash Fashion had are not there anymore. It's like I'm
Yeah.
just seeing things differently, and
And
so
speaking,
like
it's
even our the leadoff song that
yeah,
as the American Carnage. I mean, that's just about the madness of how daily violence and mass shootings is so common now. It's not taking either side of anything other than it's just an observation of like, this is fucking madness right now. Not to get all serious here, but
no, but that's an important part because obviously that could help to change the way that you might approach a certain record based on what's going on in around you, right?
yeah,
Different topics
absolutely.
and things of that
The
nature.
energy, that kind of
Exactly.
energy. Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure.
And
Absolutely.
I'm also curious too, because of the different music that you've played over the years, your family and those that are very close to you, like what have been their thoughts of your music career?
Well, I would say this. My mom was my biggest fan. She's passed away, but I don't know. It's weird. I never really ask my family members what they think of. Ask my girlfriend, you know, and she'll let me know. Like she's got cool taste, and she'll let me know if something's worth, pursuing musically, right? But I don't know, man. I just kind of, when you throw stuff out there, you're just so it's vulnerable. You're vulnerable, because you're throwing stuff out there. Like you just can't think about anything other than, did this mean something to me? And, am I giving it what I've got? And if you're good with that, it's a great feeling, because it's an artistic satisfaction. So validation from, say, my brothers, who, yeah, my one brother said to me, "This is the most kick-ass band you've had yet." He did say that. I played it for him in a car, and he just went, "Dude, this stuff kicks ass. This is your most kick-ass band yet." And I went, "Okay, cool, yeah, it is." But you just to make a long story short, is the whole thing about validation, especially in today's world with social media, right? The thumbs up, that's the validation, right? Like everybody's seeking that. It's like, that's all cool and all, but it's gotta feel right with you, and then that way you don't give a shit. You know what I mean? It's great if you get it. You're not going to be tripping if you don't. And that's where you need to be if you're going to be doing this.
Right.
Especially at my age. It's like,
Fair point.
you know what I mean? It's like you don't have the time for any of that stuff, because it doesn't mean anything. So you just go for the stuff, the good stuff.
Right. Exactly. Is
Yeah.
is Crime Wave the only current band project you have going on at the moment?
Yeah, I've had friends ask me to collaborate, and really cool people too that I would love to do stuff with. But the reality is that I don't know a whole lot, but I'll tell you what, I know that I only have so much energy to give to the music, which is everything. It's at a point where I can't let up and go do something over there that's not really 100% me. It's like, I'd rather just give everything to this. And so it's an emotional, and it's a creative, and it's a financial and spiritual commitment to pursuing what you want to do musically. Like, and it's weird, I for so many years I treated music, um I don't know, I don't want to say disrespect, but borderline disrespect, on how I viewed myself as a songwriter and a musician. I still had that rock and roll junkie mentality about, it's okay if it's got all raggedy or loose ends and whatever. And then I just, over the, as time moves on, I'm in a different space now, where now I want it to be good and tight, and and handle my business instead of just kind of dabbling.
Right.
I don't
No,
know if that makes sense. Yeah,
no, I completely understand. Yeah, I think
yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. The Is there any new music Crime Wave has that should be coming out soon?
Okay, well, cool. I'm gonna do a shameless little plug. This was the Crime Wave 24/7 EP. It's pretty ass kicking. It's getting great reviews and airplay all over the world. That's available on the Bandcamp thing. But we're new music is coming starting Saturday of this week and Sunday. We're actually going in the studio. The timing's real cool here. I get to tell you this. We're tracking 8 new songs, and this is kind of a bigger studio. This was the EP was recorded live in our rehearsal space downtown, which is cool. It's got a great vibe. But we're actually now going to go into a bigger studio and see what happens in a bigger studio. 8 new songs, which if everything goes as planned, we'll have that out, like, by before summer, or right at summertime. That's the
Nice.
goal. Yeah, yeah,
Any plans of doing any light touring?
definitely. The UK seems to be a spot where there's a vibe for us. You know, it's vibrant over there still. It's vibrant. There's a lot of cool scenes. Like we want to get up to Portland, Oregon. They've got a great metal scene going on up there. But that's another thing with Crime Wave. When I've talked about left of the center stuff, it's like it's hard rock, but where does that sit in? It's this always the same dilemma because there's so many different influences that go into the music. And Smash Fashion had the same thing, same dilemma. where where would you aim Crime Wave? It's a hard rock band, but it's not a heavy metal band, but it's not a pop band, but there is a commercial tint to it. Like we're back to the same old thing of like, well, let's see where this is gonna, catch sail.
Yeah. Do you
Seems
find
to be
that
going over good.
do you find that a band that might be a little bit more tricky to pigeonhole is a little harder for people to kind of be kind of get behind? Have you noticed that at all?
You hit it right on the head. That's exactly what it is. It's because it is hard to pigeonhole. It doesn't go through as fast. It's just it's going like this. It's hit. The waves are going like this. Where something that's really obvious is just moving straight through. But once again, it's like, well, you got to stick to your guns, man. You just got to do what you do. Like for me to try to do something, even in the hardcore scene, I would write these songs and they would sound like a hardcore song, and I'd go, yeah, but it doesn't feel. It just feels like I'm bullshitting here. Where I'd rather be real about it. And it's the same now. Like, do you try to just soften up your sound, go commercial, do whatever? What's the point? I just wouldn't even want to ever do something like that. It's,
Right.
you know, yeah. You just do it because that's what, as a songwriter, that's what's happening right now. Like that's what's coming out. I firmly believe that the energies are out there, and you need to, on a creative level, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're a painter or a songwriter or whatever, to open up a mind space, right? Open up a mind space that allows that creativity to come in. Because, that time when you're, using a power drill or something, and that mind space is open, actually now you're hearing a goddamn melody. You're hearing a melody in that power drill, and you run over to your phone and hum that melody in. And that's what I'm saying, like keeping your it's that mind space. And it's hard to get to sometimes, especially in today's society, and especially as you get older and all that other stuff, to not have your head full of shit, so to speak.
Right.
you know
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, totally. The
yeah,
with you being gone from Florida for as many years as you've been, have you at all tried to stay connected in some way, shape, or form to what's
yeah.
going on? Maybe not Florida as a whole, but maybe more so South Florida. Have you had ties still and connections still down there where you've been able to keep aware of what's going on?
Yeah, I do. And oh well, when Rattlebone was touring, we went back to Florida. We that was kind of fun going back there, with a record deal and stuff. But as
Where was
far as like,
that? Do you remember where that was at? Where you played?
yeah, I know we did Tampa, the Rocket Club. Remember that place?
I've heard of it.
And then we did a place in Miami. I maybe called the Kitchen, or it was a club that had came up years after we had
Yeah,
gone.
the Kitchen was
But
a club. Yeah, yeah.
and then Orlando, we played in Orlando with Driving and Crying, another great band.
I saw them open for Aerosmith a long time ago.
Driving and Crying, yeah, they were phenomenal. We did a lot of shows with them. But getting back to Florida, uh yes, there's some musicians I'm still in contact with. And then you probably heard about that. The Miami Punk Reunion show they did a few years ago? I think it was about 5, 6 years ago now.
Glad you
I
brought that up because you were on stage for that show.
that was kind of fun. I felt honored to be up there with Chris Bacon and Ray Harris from the legendary Zed Cars. Um, I felt outstayed. I should have jumped off the stage earlier because they wanted me to sing songs I didn't really know. So, I remember that starting off with a bang because I knew the 4 songs they wanted me to sing. And then, it turned into like, oh, well, let's play some more. And it was great, but it was fun. And that was my last time on a stage there.
That
It
was
felt
it. That was at Churchill's.
That was at Churchill's. And believe it or not, the Drills never played Churchill's. Mainly because we were on our way out of LA or out of Miami by the time Churchill started becoming a spot. I remember going there once or twice before I took off, but just getting drunk in there. And one time I got in a fight in there one night too. Some guy was molesting my girlfriend while she was passed out. Those were the days. So yeah, a big fight broke out.
I bet.
But yeah, Churchill's. That's where that was, and it was kind of cool, man. There was all the Miami, a lot of the legends that are still alive. Charlie Pickett was there, and some of the guys from the Eat, and it was cool. The Front. There was a good scene, man.
Was there any band in particular, or maybe someone that really got you most excited since you hadn't really played on stage down there? First time at Churchill's playing,
Yeah.
was there anyone else that you were
Oh
really
yeah.
excited to get a chance to see play?
Oh yeah, for sure. Almost everybody actually. And also there was a band called Amazing Grace. Do you remember them? Those guys were my friends, and
Yeah.
man, did we love them. It's funny when the Drills and Amazing Grace were kind of at the same time in the Miami scene. And there was like one group, a camp of people that liked us, and there was another camp of people that liked them, and I always really loved them. I looked up to them and I was in awe of how professional they seemed to be. Like they had great gear and they had it together, and like seemed like we were still kind of like ragamuffin band with mix and matching gear, and we just didn't have the financial backing that they did. I found out later on that Doc McGee, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but somebody was funding them with some pot money. And so they had all this, stuff, and, they made a bigger sounding record. But the truth is that we liked each other a lot. We loved those guys, and they were always super cool to us. And there was always this kind of pitched rivalry, and it so wasn't anything really like that at all. There was no rivalry at all. Those guys were great. So I was excited to see them. Everybody. It was great seeing everybody down there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because those types of things, they don't happen every day.
There's so many, they did a thing there at that where they were showing people, our musician friends and scenester people that were gone now, up on a screen. You're just going, wow, wow, wow. People were checking out already. Our generation was and I have a song called this too, the Hep C generation. We weren't the Pepsi generation, we were the Hep C generation. Like so many people that, affected so many people in my age bracket, people that were drinking and drugging a lot, came down with the Hep, Hep C. So, people are, some don't make it, it's kind of sad.
Was Alex Herrera showed on that screen too?
Yeah, Alex Herrera was on there, and I also did a record in '87 before I left Miami with the Psycho Daisies, and you know who those guys are, right?
Of
John
course.
Salton, yeah, John Salton, the guitar god, good friend of mine. Um, Johnny asked me to sing. Always wanted to talk about this actually. Johnny wanted me to sing on a record they were making, and we were hanging out a little at that time, listening to music and stuff. We liked the same stuff, and I loved the Psycho Daisies, so I was like, "Yeah, cool." So he had me come down to a space. There was actually a recording studio. He had me come down to a recording studio, and there are some songs, and so I literally learned them pretty much on the spot, right? One by one. But the levels of intoxication were getting, as the hours were ticking on, that was getting heavier and heavier. And then, you know, I think I cut like 5 songs or something with them, just singing all fucked up into the mic. And then so I said to John later on, like a couple days later, okay, so when can I do my vocals on the tracks? Like, you know, the like get into them. He goes, oh, so we're already done with it. We're just going to use that stuff. So it is what it is. But uh, I found it really amusing that that record is called Sonically Speaking. Got on Spin magazines at the end of the '80s. They had the best of the '80s issue of Spin magazine, and it had the top 80 independent records, and there's that fucking record. It's like it was like they listed it like number 67 or something, you know, like there's that record that I just couldn't even believe that he just threw out there, you know. I got paid 2 little caps of heroin and a 6-pack for that.
That's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at least you remember, the specifics of that too. That's
Oh,
good.
I don't remember too much of it, but
Okay.
the general memory of it was is that, you know, wow, I just learned the songs and I'm really fucked up, and it'd be great to, you know, do this, you know, again in the proper zone, and like it didn't happen, but whatever. I was still kind of I'm honored to be affiliated with Johnny. Like he was great, man. I seen that guy going off on at Charlie Pickett gigs and Psycho Daisies. You know what I mean? I was a huge fan of his. So like being affiliated with all those guys, that was Johnny Sultan, that was Marco Pettit, and John Styx, Galloway. All those guys are gone. That record, I'm the only guy alive. So, you know, playing with those dudes, just or being affiliated with them, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
These guys are legends to me.
Definitely one of those bands that I kind of wish more people were aware of. They're almost like, I think so much time has passed since
Psycho
then.
Daisy.
Yeah, Psycho Daisies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
One of,
same with Charlie Pickett. To me, Charlie Pickett was always the godfather of our scene. Always had the highest uh, respect for him. And funny story, about 2, 3 weeks ago, I was driving home on a Friday night, and my phone rings, and I look, and it says Dana Point, Florida. I think this was a Florida number, and I answer it, and I hear this voice go, Roger Deering, Charlie Pickett. And I just went, wow, man, Charlie Pickett's calling me, man. Like, this is one of my heroes. It was great. And like, we had a good long chat, and, you know, felt like we were old friends, you know, like, you know, I told him, Charlie, anytime you're in California, hit me up, dude. I'd love to see you. Like, you know, those were the guys I went when I first got to Miami, and I went and saw this band, and I saw these 3 fucked up guys, this angry drummer, lead guitar player, just staggering around out of his mind. And the other guitar player, the bass player looking all like dope fiendy and, messed up. And then there's Charlie, like, this dude that drove a bulldozer in the daytime, like singing in a rock band. But he was kind of like, it kind of always reminded me of like the Velvet Underground and the Flamin' Groovies. They were just cool. Like there was something special about that band. A lot of great bands back then. It's like Florida, man. That's where it was happening. you know, I can't
I
think of a
agree.
cooler place for my formative years as a musician in Florida, in particular that South Florida, and not really the hardcore scene. We were around a little bit before that. The punk scene, the underground music scene, and like that kind of was the beginning of it. Of what we want to do with music.
And it was a great time, I think, to be a part because it was so flourishing and growing, and it was all new and different. And I think a lot of the understanding, I feel like, to able to put more things into context. And I know you were in the recent book that Joey Seaman and Chris Potash put out, Punk Under the Sun. You may
You
have a
you
look
you
at
mean
that.
this book?
There
You
you
mean this
go.
book right here?
And we didn't plan that.
This
So
book is great, people. Buy it. It's really cool. Yeah.
talk about that. Why is it a cool book?
Well, it's a cool book because they managed to put it out and tell the story of a lot of really cool things that happened there. Um, I was there, I witnessed it, and I participated in it, and I got messed up and said it was pure sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it was awesome place to be. There was in a lot of this, what he managed to do in that book is talk about some other bands. There's a lot of bands that got missed in there. That always happens, but this is the first book to start shedding some light that there was a really vibrant, lively scene here with a lot of stuff going on. It was a cool time to be of a young age in Miami at that time. So there's so much cool shit going on, man. There was fire and ice. There was hot goth chicks everywhere. At that scene, the punk scene. There was the rock scene. It was just a fun time to be around. Lots of drugs, good cocaine.
And because all these kinds of scenes were going on simultaneously, when you were looking through the book for the first time, did you find that there was something that maybe you missed that you were learning about yourself?
No, I kind of knew, like by the time I started hanging out there, I saw a lot of cool bands. So I kind of had my finger on the pulse on most of that stuff. The stuff that was cool for me though was the stuff that I missed before I got there. The reactions, who I mentioned earlier, who I really love. Now the Eat, I did get a chance to see, and as a matter of fact, I saw them quite a few times. And um, before uh, the drills were formed, when we started off as the Upsetters, our very first drummer was Chris Cotty of the Eat. I met Chris. I saw him play live. I remember I think he ran off the stage naked, and he ran down the street naked. I'm not kidding. And like that was like the first time I saw him, and I was like, wow. And then I was taking a class at Miami-Dade uh, uh, community college, and it was an audio visual class. And lo and behold, here's a guy that comes pushing in like a little Rubbermaid with a projector on it, and it's fucking Chris Cotty. And I'm like, that's a dude from the Eat. And at that point, I was trying to put together a band. Chris came over to our crib, and we were jamming Roxy music, editions of you. We were jamming Devo, early Devo songs, and a couple Sex Pistol songs, and with a couple other dudes and Chris Cotty, and didn't pan out, but Chris Cotty and the Eat. So there was bands that I just didn't see, and getting a chance to read about them and seeing them get some recognition, really cool, because I knew about them. I just didn't get a chance to see them. I was one of those dudes, man, that ever since I was a kid, when I'd go see a band, I would check out everything, what amp they're playing, what cable they're using, what foot pedals they're using, what shoes the dude's wearing, what clothes he's got on, what I'm telling you, man, I would check it all out. And the good rock and roll stuff, like, I lived and breathed that kind of stuff, the music and the presentation, like it meant a lot to me even back then. So, seeing some of these bands like that, like the Zed Cars, and getting a chance to play with Ray and Chris, those guys were gods, man. Even back then, like they just weren't famous, or Screaming Sneakers, another great band. I remember seeing them at Flynn's, and I was thinking, why isn't this band one of the biggest punk bands in the world? They've got songs. Lisa Nash is a total star. Tattoos and a mohawk before any other chicks, like way ahead, like in great songs. Like there was just so much great stuff in Miami. There really was great bands.
Yeah. And that is one of those unfortunate things, right? Because you having a chance to see them way back when, and then you get the book, Punk Under the Sun, you look at the pictures, and you get a real visual of
Yeah,
not only what they sound like, but what they look like. And you
yeah,
ask yourself that same question, like, how was that band not bigger than
yeah,
they were?
yeah. Well, Miami is it's really far. It's a long drive down there, right? So to journey around, get out of there, it's tough. There's really no record company industry there or close by, so you'd have to go to New York, or where there's a really thriving indie scene that might have a mid-sized cool label or whatever. I'm talking about back then. There just wasn't an infrastructure to help musicians. And like, so this punk rock was not a big business yet. It was still being done in dumpy little wherever, right? And, even backyards or whatever. I remember the Drills playing some kid's living room, packed, kids going out ape shit right in front of us. But it was in a living room, but it was just like insanity. Like you would just play. It wasn't a business. It was a movement. It was a youth movement of high energy, the hardcore scene, which was, even a more of an extension of the punk scene. It upped the ante, energy wise, like, so it was a movement, you could see it. You could see it
Right.
from when the Drills moved from doing the nightclub to now an all ages thing. You saw it just growing. Like every show, there was more and more kids and younger kids. Like
Of
it
course.
yeah, caught a
It
nerve with
it
that
opened the
crowd.
doors to more people to come in, and it being more accessible. And now you can really expand your audience to the people who couldn't
Yeah,
go to those shows because they were too young. And now you're getting that crowd, and it's
and
that
when you're
energy.
at that age, that kind of energy is very, very attractive. It really is. My thing is that I was attracted to the energy, but I needed more musicality in it. I got bored real quick in it, and it needed to have dynamics like the music, and that's what I was saying about the Drills. When the Drills came to LA, that element of the band, the dynamics and the songwriting, it just moved up from that more kind of, high energy rock, but not as dynamic. It was, to me, it always felt like underdeveloped. But the Drills were a drinking club. That's what I was. We really were. It was a drinking club, and then the band thing was kind of next.
And just on that note, Roger, how would you describe, in your opinion, what the legacy of the Drills is?
Um, for outsiders that put together a high energy rock band of doing their own material and holding their own and going toe to toe with everybody else of that era, which was an era of really, really high energy music. Listen to the Bad Brains, or like just the energy of all those bands back then. It was so it was free of worrying about selling records. You know what I mean? It didn't come from that. It came from, I need to get this out. It's whether it was an anger or an aggression or whatever. It was a way of blowing off steam. Which is funny, ironically, that all those bands from that era that are still doing it are making big fucking money now. Some of them, I'm seeing some of my friends finally, after 40 years of not making dough, like touring the world,
Right.
you know, older hardcore bands. Like they've got another lease on life because the internet, everything else, there's the whole world is connected now. You got fans over here that you never knew you had, fans over there you never knew you had, and now you can go do stuff.
And it's interesting how you could be working on this, 40 plus years, yet someone can become internet famous overnight and then skyrocket to that viral space that you might be working really hard. Like we talked about the videos earlier, like, man, I don't understand why one video is getting more hits than the other
Right.
one, but someone can come out with something that you're like, what, wait, what is this? And
Yeah.
it,
I see it all the time.
yeah,
I see it all the time. I just seen it with the American Carnage video. Sometimes other videos attached to yours. I don't know how that works, but there was this one. I went, okay, these guys look kind of rock, and I looked at it, and I went, huh, okay. I couldn't connect with it at all. It didn't feel sincere. Yet the amount of views they had was astonishing. It's what we were talking about earlier. The more obvious, campy, or obvious something is now, it flows faster than something that isn't as obvious. So it was one of those things, man. Can't get caught up in that shit,
right.
You just can't.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Let me just say, before time escapes us, it's been wonderful getting you on the podcast to talk about your life and the story, the journey that you've taken over the years. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about the drills, and that's important, but also talking about the other bands that you've been in and how a lot of that changed when you went out to LA and the West Coast of the country. So exciting to know that you're still doing your thing and Crime Wave is
Still
working on,
kicking it,
yeah,
man.
still, and that's fantastic. So as we get ready to kind of close things out, I do want to turn it over to you. Any final words you want to share to fans of yours, bands you played in, past, present, future, anything you wanted to share? I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, first, let me say thanks for having me. This is so cool, Jeff. The whole thing is really awesome. The whole Florida connection. I love it. It's great, and I feel honored and chuffed to be here. But I would want to say this is that anybody that's kind of known me over the years, or the bands that I've been involved with, is like, check out what we're doing right now. I mean, I'm really, really proud of this band, the Crime Wave Band. As you can see, it's spelled Crymwav. I don't know why we chose that name, but it's I think it was kind of like to have our own space. Like, so you know what I mean? This is no one else is spelling this fucking name like this. This is us. But this is some pretty ass kicking stuff. We're on the Bandcamp thing, and like the whole social media thing. We could use the help over there. Come give our page the like. We're not going to bombard you with bullshit, but we do have some pretty kick-ass rock and roll coming up, and love to see everybody there. Yeah, thanks for having me, dude. Appreciate it.